I am Andrew.
And I'm Maja.
And this is two randos catching a tram. And what should two randos do on a sunny spring day? Well, let's go and visit some trams. The first tram our young guide showed us was from 1873 and was drawn by horses and mules.
It was sent to Oporto in Portugal, and that was where it ran for almost its entire life, actually being used. For some parts of that track it would have had to use maybe up to 6 mules to pull it up to the very steepest part of the tracks. And I do feel sorry for the driver at that point, because 6 mules would have not been easy to control, especially on these busy streets. It actually had a very long life, and even in around 1904, 1905, when steam or electric trams began to be used instead, Oporto 9 here continued to be used, but as a trailer instead. So rather than being horse-drawn itself, it was attached to the back of some newer steam-powered trams and pulled around. This one in particular also had a very long life because of its use of taking workers to and from ports and factories, especially the sardine factories, hence the wooden seats inside to try and avoid the smell that would sink into nicer upholstered seats. So it wouldn't have been particularly comfortable, but it did the job very well of taking workers to and from where they needed to go.
Particularly interesting for me was seeing the trams of the 1920s. Over or almost 100 years old, they came about after an era of mass unemployment that followed the First World War. The 20s of the last century were groundbreaking in many ways. Alexander Fleming invented penicillin, the BBC was established, Oxford became the first university to award degrees to women, and women earned the same voting rights as men. There was a housing boom, employment in the new motor industries, and the bright young things of the century ago were enjoying cinema and jazz. I can almost see them hopping on and off the trams in big urban centers.
"88 miles an hour? No need for a time machine to go back in time at Crich. A really wonderful museum of a time not too long ago that now seems like an age. The great irony, of course, is that technology killed the tram, and yet now it seems a green alternative and is present in many parts of the UK in cities like Birmingham, Manchester and London.
Our last international tram in the exhibition hall, and one of the most recent ones in here as well. So this one was in Den Haag in the Netherlands, and surprisingly, for something designed by a committee, this tram was very, very popular. So after World War II, trams were kind of becoming a bit obsolete. A lot of the tracks had been damaged by bombing or during the war, and they weren't really being upkept. So a lot of the tram companies and manufacturers got together and thought of a way that they could keep trams modern and modernise them for the new world going forward. And this was what came out of that. So compared to the older trams that you can see around us, you can see this has a much more modern, kind of sleek design, more like a bus or a car. It also had smoother braking, better acceleration, it was a better, smoother ride for the passengers as well. And so this kind of tram became very, very popular, especially in Europe. It was around 1940s that it was first designed, and many, hundreds of them were created. This one in particular was made in 1958, like I say, in the Netherlands. They lasted for a long time. They really did modernise the idea of trams, and even though cars and buses were becoming competitors, this kind of tram kept trams going, basically. They lasted until around 1990s in Europe, 1993 to be particular in the Netherlands, when this tram stopped being used. Ironically, 1994 is when this kind of tram came into use in the UK, in Sheffield specifically. So right as Den Haag here was being phased out in Europe, our own trams in Sheffield specifically first were started being used, leading to the modern trams that we have today.
The time before Amazon Prime. I guess we weren't the only time travellers visiting on this day.
Thank you very much. Hold tight. Remain seated, please. So those are your tickets.
I leave this museum feeling that the era of trams is not over. They may have lost the battle to cars and buses in the 20th century, but they may win the battle of the future. Electric trams can be hooked to the national grid, which means they're emission-free at the point of operation. They can carry more passengers than buses and can use electricity generated by green sources like wind and wave.